grand summit hall of Blackstone Fortress smelled of cedar smoke, roasted venison, and the suffocating musk of 1,000 predatory wolves. Winter Ashford kept her eyes down as she moved through the crowd, her fingers trembling against the silver tray laden with crystal glasses. Each glass was worth more than she'd earned in a year. Each alpha in this room could kill her with a thought. She had learned long ago to make herself small, invisible, a shadow passing between the mountains of power that filled this hall. Her blonde hair was woven into tight braids that pulled at her scalp, a style meant to keep her neat and unnoticed. The thin servant's dress did nothing against the December cold seeping through the fortress walls. But Winter didn't shiver. Shivering drew attention. Attention meant pain. Across the massive hall near the roaring fireplace carved from a single piece of granite, Garrett Thornwell laughed. The sound carried over the din of celebration, a bark of dominance that made Winter's wolf whimper deep inside her chest. Her ex-alpha stood with his arm draped possessively over a woman whose bloodline was as pure as fresh snow. Lady Helena something or other, daughter of the Eastern Territory's wealthiest pack. Winter watched them for just a second. 1 second of weakness, 1 second of remembering what it felt like to believe she might have been enough. Garrett caught her looking. His smile sharpened into something cruel. He whispered to Helena, and the woman's gaze cut toward Winter like a blade. They laughed together. Winter looked away. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frightened bird in a cage. She moved faster through the crowd, trying to reach the service entrance before, "Watch where you're going, little mouse." Lady Vivian Blackstorm materialized in Winter's path like a storm cloud taking human form. She was beautiful in the way that ice sculptures are beautiful. Cold, sharp, untouchable. Her gown was midnight blue silk that probably cost more than Winter's entire life. Winter stopped head bowed. "My apologies, Lady Blackstorm. I didn't." Vivian's foot shot out. Winter saw it coming, had half a second to try to adjust. But her body was exhausted from 3 shifts in the kitchen, from a dozen years of poison slowing her reflexes from a lifetime of being too broken to fight back. The tray tilted, the glasses slid, and then Winter was falling, the world tilting sideways as her knees hit the stone floor. The crash of shattering crystal was like thunder in the sudden silence. 1,000 conversations died mid-sentence. 1,000 predatory eyes turned toward the clumsy servant girl, kneeling in a spreading pool of wine and glass. Winter's hands landed in the shards. She felt the bite of crystal slicing through her palms, felt the burn of something else. Silver. The glasses had been edged in silver filigree. Decorative, beautiful. And now burning into her skin like acid. The smell of her own flesh searing filled her nostrils. She bit down on her lip hard enough to taste blood, refusing to make a sound. Crying out would only make it worse. "Clumsy thing," Vivian said loudly, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "This is why we shouldn't allow defective wolves to serve at important functions. Look at the mess." Winter kept her head down, watching her blood mix with the wine, dark red spreading across pale stone. Her hands were smoking where the silver touched. She tried to pull them back, but moving meant cutting them deeper on the glass. She was trapped, kneeling in her own blood in failure while 1,000 alphas watched and judged and found her wanting. This was her life. This had always been her life. The guards would come soon, would drag her to the kitchens. Garrett would hear about this. He'd add the cost of the glasses to her debt, maybe another $5,000. Maybe he'd decide she needed a reminder about being careful. The silver poker, the one his sister Chloe liked to heat in the fire until it glowed orange. Winter closed her eyes and waited for the hands to grab her. Instead, she heard the doors. The massive oak doors at the far end of the hall groaned open. The sound was like the earth splitting. The air in the room didn't just turn cold, it vanished. Every molecule of oxygen seemed to be sucked toward those open doors. Winter felt it before she saw it. A pressure, a presence, something vast and terrible and ancient walking into this hall of modern wolves. The conversations didn't just stop. They were murdered mid-breath. The only sound was footsteps. Heavy boots against stone. Thud, thud, thud. A heartbeat made of thunder. Winter kept her eyes on the floor, on her bleeding hands on the shattered crystal that had destroyed her. She didn't look up. Looking up at an alpha uninvited was grounds for punishment. She'd learned that lesson with scars, but she could see the boots approaching. Black leather worn from travel splattered with mud that looked almost like dried blood. They moved through the crowd with purpose, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea before Moses. The boots didn't stop at the high table where the elders sat. They didn't stop at the treaty podium where the celebration centered. They kept coming. Thud, thud, thud. getting closer, louder, until they stopped 3 feet from where Winter knelt in glass and blood and shame. The silence was so complete that Winter could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the crackle of the fire 50 feet away, could hear someone's breath catch in shock. "Look at me." The voice wasn't a roar. It wasn't a shout. It was worse. It was a low, vibrating growl that seemed to come from the stones beneath her knees, from the mountains surrounding this fortress, from somewhere deep in the earth where ancient things slept. It was a command that made her wolf silent and broken, and buried under years of poison, lift its head for the first time in memory. Winter's body obeyed before her mind could stop it. Her head rose. Her eyes traveled up black boots, up legs like tree trunks, up a torso that seemed carved from the mountain itself until finally she was looking into the face of Logan Steele, the Alpha King. He was exactly as terrifying as the legends claimed. More so, the stories said he was 6.5 feet of muscle and scar tissue and barely contained violence. They said he'd killed 40 rogues in a single night during the Blood Moon Massacre. They said his wolf was so feral that he fought it every second of every day just to maintain human form. But the stories hadn't mentioned his eyes. They were black, not brown. Black, like looking into a mine shaft that went down to the center of the earth. But as Winter stared too shocked to look away, she saw them shift. Flickers of gold swirling in that darkness like embers in coal. And they were looking at her like she was the only person in this hall of 1,000 wolves. Logan Steele didn't kneel prettily. He dropped to one knee in the blood and glass and wine, like a warlord taking a knee on a battlefield. His massive frame bent his scarred hand reaching out. Winter flinched, couldn't help it. Hands reaching for her meant pain, but his hand didn't strike. It hovered near her face so close she could feel the heat radiating from his skin despite the winter cold. "Your hands are bleeding," Logan said. His voice was quieter now, but it still carried to every corner of the hall. "But that's not what hurts you, is it?" Winter's throat was too tight to speak. She could only stare at this impossible creature kneeling in front of her. His nostrils flared. He was scenting her, reading her the way wolves do. And then his eyes flashed pure, molten gold. His entire body went rigid, every muscle locked. His hand still hovering near her face trembled. Not with weakness, with restraint. Like he was holding back something massive that wanted to break free. "What is your name?" The question came out rough, like he was speaking around broken glass in his own throat. "Winter," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "Winter Ashford, Your Majesty." Something passed over his face. Recognition. Hunger. And something that looked almost like relief, so profound it was painful to witness. "Winter," he repeated, tasting the word. "Winter Ashford." He leaned closer. Close enough that she could smell him now. Cedar smoke, aged leather, and winter wind from the peaks. It was overwhelming. It was wrong. No, not wrong, different. It cut through the smell of blood and fear and made her wolf, her broken, poisoned, silent wolf, make a sound. A whimper that was almost like recognition. Logan's eyes widened. He'd heard it. Of course he'd heard it. Alpha Kings heard everything. "You're shivering," he observed. His hand finally made contact, his thumb brushing just beneath her jaw, right over the scar she usually kept hidden under her collar. The scar left by years of silver pressed against her throat. His touch was gentle. Impossibly gentle for hands that had torn rogues apart. Winter's entire body jerked at the contact. Not from pain, from the opposite. From the sudden, shocking absence of pain. Where his skin touched hers, the burning from the silver stopped. The ache in her bones eased. The constant pressure of the poison in her system quieted. "It's the cold, my lord," Winter lied. Her eyes darted to the floor, to anywhere but his face. "Just the cold." "There is no cold here," Logan said. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, following the hidden scar with precision that said he could see it even though it was covered. "There is only a king who has been searching for something he didn't know he'd lost." He turned his head slightly, his gaze cut toward Garrett Thornwell. The entire hall held its breath. Garrett stood frozen by the fireplace, his face pale, his new mate clutching his arm hard enough to leave marks. He looked like a man watching his entire world collapse. Logan's lip curled. Not a smile, a sneer of pure, undiluted dominance. He didn't say a word to the lesser alpha. Didn't need to. His posture said everything. His hand on Winter's face, his body angled between her and the crowd. His wolf rising so close to the surface that the gold in his eyes was spreading, consuming the black. "Mind that," posture said. "She is mine, and I will end anyone who questions it." Logan stood and Winter found herself being lifted with him. His hand moved from her jaw to the small of her back, pulling her against his side like she weighed nothing. Like she was precious. Like she was, "The summit is postponed," Logan announced. His voice filled the hall, bounced off the vaulted ceiling, made the chandeliers sway. "I have found my fated mate." The gasps were audible, shocked, disbelieving. Winter's mind couldn't process the words. Fated mate, her. The broken Omega who couldn't shift. The servant girl with the debt she'd never pay off. The defective wolf that Garrett had thrown away like trash. This had to be a mistake. A cruel joke. Some kind of political game she didn't understand. But Logan's hand on her back was solid. Real. His scent was wrapping around her like a blanket, and her wolf was responding, was waking up after years of silence was, "Anyone who has harmed her," Logan continued, his eyes sweeping the crowd with lethal focus, "will answer to me personally." His gaze locked onto Garrett. Held. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees, starting with whoever put that collar on her neck. Garrett's face went from pale to gray, his mouth opened. Closed. No sound came out. Winter's hand rose to her throat, instinctively covering the scar tissue hidden beneath the high collar of her servant's dress. How did he know? How could he possibly? My Lord King. Vivian Blackstorm stepped forward, her voice carefully modulated, respectful but firm. "Surely there's been some mistake. Winter Ashford is—" "The woman I have been waiting for," Logan interrupted. His hand tightened on Winter's back. Not painfully, possessively. "The woman whose scent I have been following for 4 years. The woman who smells like summer rain in December." He leaned down, his lips brushing against Winter's ear. His breath was hot against her skin. "I'm going to ask you something," he whispered, quiet enough that only she could hear. "You can say no. You can walk away. But if you say yes, every person in this room will know you belong to me. They'll never touch you again. Your debt disappears. Your brother goes free. You become untouchable." Winter's heart stopped. Her brother. Micah. How did he know about Micah? "What do you need me to do?" The words came out barely audible. Logan pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. His were still gold, still predatory, but there was something else there. A question. A choice being offered. "In about 30 seconds, he said, still quiet, "your ex-Alpha is going to step forward and try to discredit you. He's going to tell this hall that you're broken. Defective. Unworthy of a king." Winter flinched, because it was true. All of it was true. "He's wrong," Logan said flatly, "but he's going to say it. And when he does, I'm going to kiss you. In front of everyone. I'm going to show this entire hall that you are mine and I am yours, and anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me for you." His hand came up to her face again, cupping her cheek with a gentleness that made her want to cry. "But I need you to choose it. I need you to want it. Because once I claim you publicly, there's no going back. You'll be mine and I'll be yours, and I will burn down every territory between here and the ocean before I let anyone take you from me." Winter stared at him, at this impossible man, this Alpha King who had just walked into a summit and stopped the world for a servant girl bleeding in broken glass. She should say no, should run. This was insane. This was my Lord King. Garrett's voice cut through the moment, loud and desperate. He pushed through the crowd, his new mate trailing behind him. "Please, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." Logan's jaw tightened. His eyes didn't leave Winter's face. "Here we go," he murmured. Garrett reached them, careful to stay outside of arm's reach. Smart. His face was flushed red with embarrassment and something that looked like panic. "Winter Ashford is—" Garrett started. "Choose," Logan whispered to Winter, ignoring Garrett completely. "Choose me or choose freedom, but choose now." Winter looked past Logan's shoulder at Garrett, at the man who had spent a dozen years making her feel like nothing, who had poisoned her food, who had held her brother hostage, who had stood by while his sister burned Winter's skin with silver just to hear her scream. She looked at Vivian Blackstorm standing in her beautiful gown with her perfect bloodline and her eyes full of cold calculation. She looked at the 1,000 wolves filling this hall, all of them, watching all of them, judging all of them, waiting to see the broken Omega be put back in her place. And then she looked at Logan Steele, at the Alpha King who smelled like cedar and leather and mountain wind, who had dropped to his knees in blood and glass for her, who was offering her a choice instead of taking what he wanted, who was looking at her like she was worth burning the world for. Winter had spent over a decade being told she was nothing, years believing it. Maybe it was time to believe something else. "Kiss me," Winter said, Her voice was steady despite the fear. Kiss me and let him see I'm taken. Logan's eyes flared pure gold. A smile touched his scarred face, not the cold sneer from before, but something warm and almost tender. As my queen commands, he said, and then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was a claiming and a promise and a declaration of war all at once. His hand tangled in her braids, tilting her head back. His other arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her onto her toes. His mouth moved against hers with a desperate hunger that stole her breath and made her wolf throw back its head and howl. The howl was silent inside her chest, but Winter felt it. Felt her wolf buried under years of poison and pain wake up and recognize something it had been waiting for. And Logan felt it too. She knew because his wolf answered. A sound rumbled up from his chest, too low for human ears, but vibrating through her bones. Recognition, acceptance, mine. Something electric sparked where their lips met. Winter gasped, and Logan used the opening to deepen the kiss, to claim every inch of her mouth like he was staking territory. The bond. The mate bond was snapping into place. Winter had heard about it. The stories said it was like lightning, like drowning and flying at the same time, like coming home to a place you'd never been. The stories were wrong. It was so much more. It was agony and ecstasy. It was every wall she'd built around her heart shattering. It was Logan's loneliness pouring into her 15 years of fighting his own wolf, of being surrounded by thousands and still completely alone, of waiting for something he couldn't name, and it was her own pain pouring into him. He saw it all, the poison, the burns, the collar welded around her throat for 10 years, the debt that would never end, the brother held hostage, the thousand small cruelties that had taught her to make herself invisible. He saw it, and his wolf screamed in rage. The kiss broke. Logan pulled back just far enough to press his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged, his eyes pure molten gold. I'm going to kill them, he said quietly. Not a threat, a promise. Everyone who hurt you, I'm going to tear them apart. No, Winter whispered. Her hands were on his chest, feeling his hard hammer against her palms. Not yet. Not like this. Logan's jaw worked. His wolf was riding him hard. She could feel it through the bond. The need to protect, to defend, to destroy anyone who had harmed his mate. But he nodded, slowly, accepting her words even as his wolf snarled. Later then, he said, but soon. He turned, keeping Winter tucked against his side, and faced the hall. Every single wolf was staring. Some had their mouths open in shock. Others looked calculating. A few looked afraid. Garrett stood 5 feet away, his face a mask of horror. His new mate had let go of his arm and was edging away, reading the room, already distancing herself from the Alpha, who had just made an enemy of the king. Winter Ashford is my fated mate, Logan said. His voice carried to every corner of the hall, calm and absolute. The bond is acknowledged. The claim is made. She is queen of the Western Territories, and anyone who questions her right to that title will answer to me in the old way. The old way, trial by combat, to the death. Silence greeted the declaration. No one was stupid enough to challenge an Alpha King, especially not one whose wolf was so close to the surface that his eyes glowed gold. But Garrett, panicked and desperate, and too stupid to know when to shut up, opened his mouth. My lord, please, he said, his voice strained. She's nobody, a servant's daughter. Her bloodline is royal, Logan interrupted. His voice was cold enough to freeze blood. Her grandmother was Alara Ashford, sister to the last Winter Queen. Winter's bloodline is older and purer than yours, Garrett Thornwell, and if you open your mouth one more time to disrespect my mate, I will remove your tongue and make you eat it. Winter's head snapped toward Logan. Alara Ashford, the Winter Queen. That was a lie you were told, Logan said quietly to her, reading her shock. Your parents didn't die in a rogue attack. They were murdered. And you were hidden in plain sight, your heritage suppressed, your wolf poisoned, so you couldn't shift and reveal what you were. The world tilted sideways. Winter's legs went weak, but Logan's arm around her waist kept her upright. We'll talk, he murmured. I promise. But right now I need to get you out of this hall before I do something that starts a war. He looked at Garrett one more time. The Alpha had gone completely white, realizing he'd just spent over a decade torturing royalty. You have 3 days to leave the Western Territories, Logan said. His voice was casual, but the threat underneath was diamond hard. If you're still here when I crown my queen, I will hunt you for sport. Run, little Alpha. Run fast. Garrett didn't need to be told twice. He turned and fled, his new mate scrambling after him. The crowd parted to let them through, then closed again, a living wall between the disgraced Alpha and his victim. Logan guided Winter toward the main doors. The crowd parted for them, two wolves bowing their heads as they passed, submitting, acknowledging. Winter's mind was spinning. Royal bloodline, murdered parents, poisoned to hide her heritage. It was too much. It was one step at a time, Logan said softly as if reading her thoughts. Maybe he was. The mate bond was still wide open, emotions flowing between them like water. Right now, all you need to do is walk. Can you do that for me? Winter nodded. She could walk. She could put one foot in front of the other. It was all she'd been doing for years. They reached the doors. The guards pulled them open, letting in a blast of December cold and swirling snow. Logan paused at the threshold, turned back to the hall one last time. The summit will resume in 3 days, he announced. At that time, I will present Winter Ashford as my queen and mate. Anyone who wishes to contest her claim may do so then. In the old way, he let the threat hang in the air. Then he guided Winter out into the snow and the darkness in the beginning of a life she couldn't even begin to imagine. The doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder. And Winter Ashford, the invisible Omega, the broken wolf, the servant girl with scars on her hands and throat, took her first breath as someone else entirely, as the fated mate of the Alpha King, as a queen. The walk from the Grand Summit Hall to Logan's private wing took less than 5 minutes, but it felt like crossing into another world. The fortress was a labyrinth of dark stone and ancient timber built directly into the living rock of the Blackwood Peaks. Torches flickered in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows on walls carved with the history of 1,000 years of wolf kings. Winter's feet moved mechanically following Logan's lead. Her mind was still back in that hall, kneeling in broken glass, watching the Alpha King drop to his knees for her. The mate bond hummed in her chest like a living thing feeding her Logan's emotions. Protectiveness, satisfaction, and underneath it all, a bone-deep relief that made her throat tight. He'd been waiting for her, not just watching, waiting. Like a man dying of thirst, waiting for rain. They passed guards who straightened at Logan's approach, their eyes widening when they saw Winter tucked against his side. News would spread fast. By morning, every wolf in the territory would know the king had claimed a mate. Finally, Logan stopped at a massive oak door reinforced with iron. He pushed it open and guided Winter inside. The room took her breath away. It was a library, not a small collection of dusty books, but a cathedral of knowledge. Thousands of volumes climbed the walls from floor to ceiling, accessible by a network of ladders and walkways. A fireplace dominated one wall large enough to walk into, already burning with logs the size of tree trunks. The ceiling soared above them, crossed with dark beams that disappeared into shadow. And the smell, cedar smoke and old paper and vanilla from aging leather. It was the smell of safety, of sanctuary. Winter stood in the doorway staring. In all her years of service at Northern Ridge, she'd never been allowed to touch a book. Garrett said reading made servants forget their place. "This is your space," Logan said quietly. He'd released her but stayed close, watching her reaction. "For as long as you need it, there's a bedroom through that door, a bathroom through the other. Food will be brought. No one enters without your permission. Not even me." Winter turned to look at him, really look at him. In the golden firelight, his scars were more visible. The major one across his cheek, yes, but others too. A thin line along his jaw. Another through his left eyebrow. The neck of his shirt was open enough to show the top of something that looked like claw marks across his collarbone. A warrior's body, a survivor's face, and eyes that were watching her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but somehow wasn't. "I don't understand," Winter said. Her voice sounded small in this vast space. "Why me? You could have anyone. Lady Blackstorm has been following me like a shadow for 3 years, yes," Logan finished. He moved to a side table and poured amber liquid into 2 heavy glasses, along with a dozen other high-born females who see a crown instead of a man. He crossed back to her, offering 1 glass. Winter took it with shaking hands. The crystal was warm against her palms. 4 years ago, Logan said, not drinking, just holding his glass and looking at her like he was memorizing her face. "I attended a border market negotiation in Northern Ridge territory. Tedious politics. I was there for an hour, and in that hour I saw you." Winter's breath caught. She remembered that market. She'd been 21. Garrett had made her haul firewood from the trading post to his lodge. The bundle had been bigger than she was. "You were carrying wood," Logan continued. His voice had gone soft, distant, like he was watching the memory play out. "Your ex-alpha was 20 feet ahead laughing with his friends, and you slipped. On ice. Went down hard. The wood scattered everywhere." Winter remembered. She'd bruised her hip so badly she'd limped for a week. Garrett didn't look back, Logan said. The gold was starting to creep into his eyes again. Didn't even pause his conversation. You were on the ground, clearly hurt, and he just kept walking. He took a slow breath, visibly pushing down his wolf's rage. I had my hand on my dagger, he admitted. I was going to kill him right there. Political incident be damned. But then you got up, started gathering the wood, and I saw your face. His free hand reached out, stopped just short of touching her cheek. You weren't crying, you weren't asking for help, you were just enduring. Like you'd done it 1,000 times before. And I realized that if I killed him, then if I took you, then you would have thought I was just another alpha taking what he wanted. Another man who saw you as a possession. His hand dropped. So I waited, I watched, I documented every time I was in territory and saw you, every small moment, every smile you tried to hide, every new scar I noticed. Winter's throat was too tight to speak. He'd been watching for 4 years. While she was being poisoned and burned and worked until her hands bled, he'd been watching. Why didn't you? She couldn't finish the question. Because you needed to choose, Logan said simply. I needed you to look at me and choose me. Not as an escape, not as a rescue, but as your mate, your equal. And tonight, when I walked into that hall and saw you kneeling in glass with that bitch Blackstorm standing over you, I knew. Knew what? That if you chose me, it would be real. Despite everything. Despite the pain and the fear and years of learning that alphas only bring suffering. If you chose me after all, that it would mean something. He finally raised his glass and took a drink, his eyes never leaving hers. So I offered you a choice. Kiss me or walk away. And you chose the kiss. Winter looked down at her hands. They were bandaged now. She didn't remember Logan doing it, but the white cloth was wrapped expertly around her palms, covering the silver burns. Her hands hadn't hurt since he touched her in the hall. The mate bond was suppressing the pain. You said my parents were murdered, she said quietly. That I'm royalty. How do you know that? Logan moved to the fireplace, resting one hand on the mantel and staring into the flames. 20 years ago, when I was 12, my mother died. She was the oracle of the Western Pax. She could see threads, futures, possibilities. His voice had gone rough. On her deathbed, she grabbed my hand and told me I would find my mate when I smelled summer rain and winter. She said I'd find the lost daughter of the Winter Queen hidden in plain sight, poisoned to silence her wolf. He turned back to Winter. She said the girl would smell like rain after a drought and wild honeysuckle growing through ruins. She said when I found her, my wolf would finally go quiet. Winter's heart was hammering. And is your wolf quiet? Logan's laugh was short and bitter. My wolf has been trying to claw out of my skin since I first shifted at 17. 15 years of fighting for control every second of every day. 15 years of rage and violence barely contained. He crossed back to her, moving slowly, carefully, like approaching a skittish animal. 3 hours ago, I walked into that hall. I smelled you across a room filled with 1,000 other scents. Rain and honeysuckle in December. And my wolf, he stopped an arm's length away. My wolf went completely silent for the first time in 15 years, like he'd been screaming in a storm and finally found shelter. He set his glass down on a nearby table and held out his hand, palm up. An offering, a choice. You don't have to believe me about your heritage right now. You don't have to believe anything. But I need you to know that I'm not rescuing you, Winter. You're saving me. Winter looked at his outstretched hand, scarred and calloused and steady. She looked at his face, at the brutal honesty in his gold-touched eyes. She thought about Garrett and years of poison. Thought about the collar they'd welded around her throat. Thought about her brother Micah still held hostage in Northern Ridge. And she thought about this man who had waited 4 years, who had documented her smiles, who had kneeled in blood and glass and offered her a choice. Winter set down her own glass and took his hand. The jolt was immediate. That same electric current from the kiss, but deeper now, steadier. The mate bonds settling into place like puzzle pieces, finally finding their match. Logan's fingers closed around hers, carefully mindful of her bandaged palms. Your brother will be here by dawn, he said quietly. I sent my beta to collect him the moment I walked into that hall. He's safe. Winter's eyes burned. How did you know about Micah? I know everything about you, Winter. I've known for 4 years. I know you hum old mountain hymns when you think you're alone. I know you're left-handed, but Garrett made you use your right until you learned to hide it. I know you sneak food to the Omega children in the servants' quarters. I know you're terrified of silver poker irons because of what Thornwell's sister did to you. When he pulled her closer until they were chest to chest, the bond between them humming with warmth. And I know that despite everything they did to break you, you're still the strongest person I've ever met. Because you survived, you endured, and tonight you chose to fight back. Winter's composure finally cracked. A sob broke free, then another. Years of held-back tears came pouring out. Logan pulled her against his chest and held her. Didn't tell her to stop. Didn't try to fix it. Just held her while she cried for the girl she'd been, for the years she'd lost, for the relief of finally being safe enough to break. She cried until there was nothing left. Until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen and her whole body ached. And through it all, Logan held her, his hand stroking her hair, his heartbeat steady against her ear, his wolf a warm, protective presence wrapped around her own broken one. When the tears finally stopped, Winter pulled back enough to look at him. His shirt was soaked. His expression was murder. "I'm going to destroy them," he said quietly. "Everyone who hurt you, not tonight, not tomorrow, but soon, and it won't be quick." Winter should have been horrified, should have protested, but she just nodded. "Okay," she whispered. Logan's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing away the last of her tears. "You need rest, food, time to process." He stepped back, putting space between them, even though she could feel through the bond that it cost him. "I'll sleep in my study. You take the bedroom. In the morning, stay." The word came out before Winter could think about it. Logan froze. "You don't have to," he started. "I know, but I'm asking, stay. Please, I don't." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't want to be alone, not tonight." Something in Logan's expression softened. He nodded slowly. "I'll stay, on the couch, or the floor, wherever you're comfortable with." Winter looked at this man, this alpha king who was offering to sleep on the floor of his own bedroom so she'd feel safe, and she made another choice. "The bed is big enough for both of us," she said quietly. "Just stay close, so I know you're real." Logan's eyes searched hers. Whatever he saw there made him nod. "Then I'll stay close," he promised, "for as long as you want me." Winter took his hand again. "What if I want you forever?" The smile that broke across Logan's scarred face was like sunrise after a long night, warm and real and devastating in its beauty. "Then forever is what you'll get." He led her to the bedroom, and for the first time in over a decade, Winter Ashford fell asleep feeling safe. Winter woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, and the scent of cedar and mountain wind wrapped around her like a blanket. For 3 perfect seconds, she forgot where she was. Forgot everything except the warmth at her back and the steady rhythm of breathing that wasn't her own. Then memory crashed in like an avalanche. The summit hall, the shattered glass, Logan Steele kneeling in blood, the kiss that had stopped the world, the mate bond snapping into place like a star being born. Winter's eyes flew open. She was lying in a bed the size of her entire servants' quarters back at Northern Ridge. The sheets were softer than anything she'd ever touched. And behind her, his chest pressed against her spine, one heavy arm draped across her waist, was the Alpha King. He was still asleep. She could tell from the deep, even breathing, from the way his wolf was quiet and peaceful through the bond instead of the constant snarling rage he'd described. Winter lay perfectly still, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell had made last night real. Then Logan's arm tightened around her waist. "Your heart is racing," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Bad dream." "No." Winter's voice came out barely a whisper, "Just trying to remember how to breathe." Logan's hand splayed across her stomach, the heat of his palms seeping through the thin nightgown someone had left for her. Not possessive. Grounding. "Breathe with me," he said quietly. "In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. He demonstrated, his chest expanding against her back. Winter followed his rhythm until her racing heart slowed to match his. "Better?" Logan asked. "Better." He pressed his face against her hair and breathed deep. "You smell like honeysuckle this morning. Stronger. The bond is settling." Winter turned in his arms, needing to see his face, to confirm he was real and not some desperate dream conjured by a broken mind. Logan looked different in the morning light, less terrifying. The harsh lines of his face were softened by sleep, and his eyes were their natural black instead of gold. But the scar across his cheek was still there, still brutal, still speaking of violence survived. "My brother," Winter said. "You said he's here." Logan's thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Arrived 2 hours ago. My beta brought him. He's safe, Winter. Federal, unharmed, sleeping in the guest wing." The relief was so intense it hurt. Micah. Safe. After being used as leverage for so long, her little brother was finally free. I need to see him. After breakfast, Logan sat up the sheet, falling to his waist and revealing a torso that looked carved from granite and covered in scars. You need food. Real food, not the poisoned scraps they were feeding you. He was right. Winter's stomach was hollow. When was the last time she'd eaten? Yesterday morning, the day before. A knock at the door made her flinch. Old habits. Logan's hand found hers squeezed gently. Come in. An older woman entered carrying a tray laden with food. She had silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Winter, then at Logan still shirtless in bed beside her, and smiled. So, this is the girl who made your wolf shut up, she said, setting the tray on a table by the window. About damn time, Logan. Winter, this is Rowena Greystoke, Logan said, swinging his legs out of bed. She was my trainer when I was young. Now she runs the household and terrorizes my guards. Rowena snorted. I keep this fortress from falling apart while you're off playing king. She turned to Winter, her sharp gaze softening slightly. Welcome, child. I've prepared a bath for you, and burned those rags you were wearing. You're a queen now. You'll dress like one. Winter opened her mouth, closed it, had no idea what to say. Don't bother arguing, Logan said, pulling on a shirt. Rowena doesn't take no for an answer. Trust me, I've tried. Rowena's smile was fierce. Damn right. Now eat. Both of you. Winter, your skin and bones. We're fixing that starting today. She left with the authority of someone who'd been giving orders for 60 years and expected them to be followed. Winter stared at the tray, fresh bread still warm from the oven. Honey, butter, eggs, bacon, fruit, more food than she usually saw in a week. It's not poisoned, Logan said quietly, reading her hesitation. I promise. Everything in this fortress is tested. Has been since I became king. Winter reached for a piece of bread with shaking hands, tore off a small piece, put it in her mouth. It tasted like heaven. She ate slowly at first, then faster, her body remembering what real hunger felt like now that it wasn't being suppressed by poison. Logan watched her with satisfaction, occasionally pushing the honey closer or refilling her water. There's something I need to tell you, he said when she finally slowed down. About the bond, about what happens next. Winter set down her fork, suddenly nervous. Logan took her bandaged hand, carefully avoiding the silver burns beneath the cloth. In 3 days, we present you to the territories as my queen. There will be a formal ceremony. Challenges are allowed. Anyone who thinks you're unworthy can contest your claim, in the old way. Trial by combat, Winter whispered. She'd heard the stories, seen the scars on alphas who'd survived challenges. Yes, but here's what you need to understand. Logan's grip tightened. I won't let anyone touch you. If there are challenges, I take them. Not you, me. That's my right as king and your mate. But no, his voice went hard. This isn't negotiable, Winter. You're still recovering from years of poison. Your wolf can't shift. You're not fighting anyone. The words should have brought relief. Instead, they brought shame. Broken, defective, unable to even defend her own claim. Logan felt it through the bond, his expression darkened. Stop, he said sharply. Whatever you're thinking, stop. You're not weak. You survived what would have killed most wolves. You endured torture that would have broken alphas. You are the strongest person I know, and I will not let you diminish that. I can't shift, Winter said. The words tasted like failure. What kind of queen can't even? The kind who doesn't need a wolf to be powerful. Logan pulled her closer. You think I claimed you for your wolf? I claimed you because when I'm near you, the monster inside me goes quiet. Because you chose to kiss me instead of run. Because you're brave enough to survive and kind enough to still care about Omega children, even when you're barely surviving yourself. His forehead pressed against hers. Your wolf will wake when she's ready. And if she never does, you're still mine. Still my queen. Still the woman I've been waiting for. Winter's eyes burned. She blinked hard, refusing to cry again. I want to see my brother, she said. Logan kissed her forehead and stood. Then let's go find him. Micah Ashford sat in a chair 3 sizes too big for him, staring at a plate piled with food like it might disappear if he looked away. He was 17 but looked younger. Too thin, too pale. His dark hair was shaggy and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of years without proper sleep. When Winter walked into the room, he looked up, saw her, and burst into tears. Winter, his voice cracked on her name. They said you were dead. Garrett said you tried to run, and the rogues got you, and... Winter crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her brother into her arms. He was taller than her now, all gangly teenage limbs, but he clung to her like he was 5 years old again. I'm okay, she whispered into his hair. I'm safe. You're safe. We're both safe now. He said if I didn't work, if I didn't do everything perfectly, he'd kill you. Micah was shaking. He made me believe. I know, but he lied. He lied about everything. Winter pulled back to look at her brother's face. Micah, listen to me. We're free, both of us. No more Northern Ridge, no more Garrett, no more, she's my mate. Logan's voice came from the doorway. He'd stayed back, giving them space, but now he stepped into the room. Your sister is my fated mate, which makes you pack, family, under my protection. Micah's eyes went wide. He looked at Logan, really looked at him, and went even paler. You're the Alpha King. I am. And you're mated to my sister. I am. Micah turned back to Winter. How, when, what? It's a long story, Winter said, but the short version is that Logan has been watching me for 4 years. He claimed me last night at the summit. And now, she paused, still getting used to the words. Now I'm queen. Micah sat down hard. Queen, you, Winter, you were a servant. You couldn't even, he stopped himself, but not before Winter heard the unspoken words. Couldn't even shift. Logan moved closer, his presence filling the room with alpha authority. Your sister is royal blood, he said calmly, descended from the Winter Queen. She was poisoned for years to suppress her heritage. That ends now. And anyone who suggests she's anything less than worthy will answer to me. The threat was quiet but absolute. Micah swallowed hard and nodded. Winter spent an hour with her brother listening to him talk about the last years, about the work they'd forced him to do, the beatings when he was too slow, the constant fear that one mistake would mean his sister's death. By the time she left him to rest, her hands were clenched into fists and murder was singing in her veins. Logan was waiting in the hallway. He took one look at her face and nodded. Now you understand, he said quietly. Now you feel what I've been feeling for 4 years. That rage, that need for revenge. I want them to suffer. The words came out cold, flat. I want Garrett and his sister and everyone who hurt us to suffer the way we suffered. Logan's smile was sharp and terrible. Good. Hold on to that, because in 3 days when we stand before the territories, you're going to need that fire. The old families won't accept you easily. They'll test you, push you, try to make you break. He stepped closer, his hand cupping her face. But you're not going to break. You're going to show them exactly what happens when you forge steel and fire. You're going to be magnificent. Winter looked into his eyes and saw absolute faith there. He believed in her. Even when she couldn't shift, even when she was still recovering. He believed. Teach me, she said. Teach me how to be a queen. Logan's smile widened. Not me, Rowena. Rowena's training was brutal. For the next 2 days, Winter learned how to stand like she owned the ground beneath her feet, how to speak with authority even when her voice wanted to shake, how to meet an alpha's eyes without flinching, how to turn insults aside with cold precision. You've been taught to make yourself small, Rowena said, circling Winter like a drill sergeant. Invisible, unthreatening. We're breaking those habits. Shoulders back, chin up. When you walk into a room, you walk like you expect everyone to bow, because they will. Winter practiced until her muscles ached, until standing tall felt almost natural, until she could look at herself in the mirror and see something other than a broken servant. But at night, when training was done and her body was exhausted, Logan was there. They'd eat dinner together in the library. He'd read to her from books she'd never been allowed to touch. They'd talk about everything and nothing. And slowly, carefully, Winter felt herself healing. The bond between them deepened. She learned that Logan had nightmares about the Blood Moon Massacre, that he'd killed his first rogue at age 15 to protect his younger sister, that he played chess against himself when he couldn't sleep because the strategy calmed his wolf. And he learned her. Learned that she could recite poetry from memory because she'd overheard it while serving. That she was terrified of small spaces because Garrett had locked her in a closet for 3 days once. That she'd never learned to swim because Omegas weren't allowed in the Pack Lake. I'll teach you, Logan said on the second night, his fingers threading through her unbraided hair. When summer comes, we have lakes here, private ones. I'll teach you to swim. Winter turned in his arms. They had fallen into the habit of the sleeping pressed together, the mate bond settling easier when they were touching. Why are you so patient with me? She asked. You could have any wolf, someone whole, someone who can shift and fight and... Logan kissed her, slow and deep and thorough. You are whole, he said when he pulled back. You're just healing. There's a difference. His hand settled over her heart. And as for fighting Winter, you've been fighting every day for years. You just weren't allowed to fight back. But that changes now. In 3 days, you'll stand in front of the territories as my equal, and anyone who challenges you will see exactly how fierce you are. What if I fail? The fear escaped before she could stop it. What if I can't? Then I'll be right beside you, Logan said simply. We'll fail together, or we'll triumph together. But either way, you won't be alone. Not ever again. Winter pressed her face against his chest and breathed him in, cedar and leather and mountain wind and safety. I love you, she whispered. She felt him go still, felt the shock ripple through the bond. Say it again. Winter pulled back to look at him. His eyes were wide, vulnerable, like she'd just handed him something precious and fragile. I love you, Logan Steele. I love your scars and your quiet strength and the way your wolf goes calm when I'm near. I love that you waited 4 years, that you gave me choices, that you see me as powerful even when I can't see it myself. Logan's hand trembled as it cupped her face. I've been loved before, he said roughly. Worshipped, desired, but never no one has ever loved me like this. Like you see all the broken pieces and love them anyway. You're a survivor, Winter said fiercely. Like me, that's why we fit. Logan laughed, a real laugh, warm and surprised. Then he kissed her again, and the bond between them blazed gold and bright and perfect. I love you too, he murmured against her lips. My fierce, brilliant, unbreakable queen. I love you too. On the night before the ceremony, Winter couldn't sleep. The weight of tomorrow pressed down on her chest. She slipped from bed carefully, trying not to wake Logan, and padded to the window. The fortress was quiet. Moonlight painted the courtyard below in silver. And in that courtyard, half hidden in shadow, she saw them. Vivian Blackstorm and Garrett Thornwell. Winter froze. Garrett was supposed to be gone. He'd had 3 days. Why was he? She pressed closer to the window, straining to hear. Their voices drifted up on the night air. Tomorrow during the shift attempt, Vivian said, her voice low and urgent. When she fails, when the crowd is distracted by her humiliation, your rogues strike. 20 silver arrows. Logan won't be watching. He'll be too focused on her failure. Winter's blood turned to ice. And if she somehow shifts, Garrett's voice was desperate, disbelieving. She won't. The girl's wolf has been poisoned for over a decade. But if by some miracle she does, the arrows still fly. Either way, the king dies. I claim the throne by combat right. You get your revenge. We both win. The guards are mine. Half the council is mine. The traditional families want her gone as much as we do. When Logan falls, no one will question my right to rule. Winter's hands gripped the windowsill hard enough to hurt. They weren't just trying to humiliate her. They were planning murder. She should run to Logan, wake him, tell him everything. He'd cancel the ceremony, arrest Vivian, hunt down Garrett. But he'd also look weak. The traditional families would call for leadership challenges. Civil war would follow. Or Winter could handle it herself. She could shift. She would shift. And she would protect her mate the way he'd been protecting her. A hand touched her shoulder. Winter jumped, spinning. Logan stood behind her, his expression unreadable. How long have you been listening? Long enough. Winter's voice was steady despite her racing heart. They're planning to kill you tomorrow. I know. Logan's hand moved to cup her face. I've known for 2 days. My guards have been tracking them. Then why haven't you? Because I wanted to see if you'd tell me. Logan's thumb brushed her cheekbone. I needed to know if you'd trust me enough to share the danger. Or if you'd try to handle it alone. Winter's eyes stung. I was going to shift, Logan finished. Face them yourself. Protect me the way I protect you. His smile was sad and proud at once. That's exactly what I would have done. We're more alike than you know, Winter. He pulled her against his chest. Tomorrow we face them together. You'll shift not because Garrett demands it, but because your wolf is ready. And when Vivian's rogues attack, my guards will be waiting. We end this, all of it. Winter nodded against his chest. Together. Together, Logan agreed. Always. They stood at the window watching the conspirators plot below, and Winter felt her wolf stir. Not afraid anymore. Ready. Tomorrow the invisible Omega would disappear forever. Tomorrow the sacred Winter Queen would rise. On the morning of the 3rd day, Winter woke to find a dress laid out on the chair beside the bed. It was white as fresh snow, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that looked like frost on windows. Beautiful, expensive, terrifying. Today was the ceremony. Today she'd stand before every major pack in the Western Territories and claim her place as queen. Today anyone who wanted to could challenge her right to exist. And today assassins would try to kill her mate. Logan was already awake, standing by the window and staring out at the mountains. He dressed in formal black, his hair pulled back every inch the Alpha King. He looked carved from stone, untouchable. Then he turned and saw her watching, and his expression softened. "Ready?" he asked. Winter looked at the dress, thought about Rowena's training, thought about Micah safe in the guest wing, thought about years of poison and pain and invisible servitude, thought about the bond in her chest, warm and golden and unbreakable, thought about the assassins waiting to kill the man she loved. "No," she said honestly, "but I'll do it anyway." Logan crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. "That's my queen," he whispered, scared and doing it anyway. "That's true courage." He kissed her forehead. "Whatever happens today, remember you're not alone. I'm with you. My wolf is with you, and anyone who wants to hurt either of us will have to go through both of us first." Winter nodded against his chest. Then she pulled back, straightened her shoulders the way Rowena had taught her, and reached for the dress. Time to show the world what happened when you tried to bury a queen. Time to show them she'd grown back stronger. The grand ceremonial hall was 3 times the size of the summit chamber. Vaulted ceilings soared 40 feet overhead, supported by columns carved from living mountain stone. 5,000 wolves packed the Space Alphas, Betas, Omegas from every territory in the western region. Their combined scent was overwhelming, anticipation and judgment and curiosity thick enough to choke on. Winter stood in the preparation chamber just off the main hall, staring at her reflection in a full-length mirror. The white dress transformed her, made her look like something out of legend. Her blonde hair had been left loose, cascading down her back in waves. Someone had woven tiny crystals through the strands that caught the light like ice. She looked like a queen. She felt like a woman about to go to war. "Stop that!" Rowena's sharp voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. The older woman appeared behind her in the mirror, adjusting the dress's shoulder. "I can see you doubting yourself. Your scent goes sour when you do it. Stop." "There are 5,000 wolves out there," Winter said. Her voice was steady despite the fear. "Most of them think I'm unworthy. Some of them want me dead, and somewhere in that crowd, assassins are waiting to kill Logan." "Then you'll deal with them." Rowena's hand settled on Winter's shoulders. "Do you know what the Winter Queens were known for, child?" Winter shook her head. "They weren't the biggest wolves, weren't the strongest fighters. They were known for surviving, for enduring winters that killed entire packs, for outlasting enemies who thought they could be broken." Rowena's grip tightened. "You have their blood. You've already proven you can survive. Now prove you can rule." A knock at the door made them both turn. Logan entered, and the sight of him stole Winter's breath. He wore formal ceremonial armor, black leather, and silver plates etched with the symbols of his lineage. A cloak of wolf fur hung from his shoulders. The crown of the Alpha King sat on his head, a brutal thing of dark metal and wolf teeth. He looked like a warlord, like violence given form, until his eyes found Winter and his expression softened into something achingly tender. "You're beautiful," he said quietly. "I'm terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He crossed to her, taking her hands carefully. The bandages were finally off her palms, healed to pink scars thanks to the mate bond. "But listen to me, Winter. Out there, they're going to test you, push you. Lady Vivian Blackstorm and her faction will try to discredit you publicly. They'll bring up your servant status, your inability to shift, your lack of training." Winter's stomach twisted. "Let them," Logan continued, "let them throw every insult they have. Because when they're done, you're going to stand there unbowed, and you're going to remind them that you survived years of systematic torture, that you endured what would have killed most alphas, that you are the fated mate of their king, chosen by the moon herself." He leaned in, his forehead touching hers. "And when the assassins strike, we'll be ready. My guards are positioned. Vivian's rogues won't get within 20 feet of me. But I need you focused. I need you strong." Winter nodded, not trusting her voice. "It's time," Rowena said from the doorway. Logan straightened his hand, finding Winter's. Together they walked toward the ceremony that would change everything. The hall fell silent as the massive doors opened. Every eye turned, every conversation died. The weight of 5,000 wolves' attention pressed down like a physical force. Winter's first instinct was to look down, to make herself small. Years of conditioning screamed at her to bow her head, to apologize for taking up space. Instead, she lifted her chin, straightened her spine, and walked forward like Rowena had taught her, like she expected the ground itself to acknowledge her passage. The crowd parted. A pathway opened straight down the center of the hall, leading to a raised dais where 2 thrones sat. Both were carved from black stone. Both were equal in size. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as they noticed. Two thrones, not a king's throne and a consort's chair. Two equal seats of power. Winter felt the speculation, the shock, the disapproval from the traditional families. Logan's hand tightened on hers, steady, anchoring. They climbed the 7 steps to the dais. The Elder Council stood waiting 12 ancient wolves who had overseen ceremonies for generations. At their center stood Elder Marcus, a man so old his hair had gone pure white and his eyes had faded to pale blue. Alpha King Logan Steele, Marcus's voice carried through the hall without strain. You have called this assembly to present your fated mate, to claim her as queen of the Western Territories and your equal in power. Is this your will? It is, Logan said. His voice was calm, absolute. Marcus turned his pale gaze to Winter. She felt him reading her, measuring her, finding her wanting. Winter Ashford, you stand before the assembled packs as mate to the king. Do you accept this bond? Do you claim the crown and all responsibilities it carries? Winter's throat was dry, but when she spoke, her voice carried clear and strong. I do. Then let any who would contest this claim come forward now. Speak your challenge, and it will be heard under the old laws. The silence stretched. Winter's heart hammered against her ribs. She scanned the crowd looking for Vivian, looking for assassins with silver arrows. I challenge. The voice came from the left side of the hall. The crowd parted, and Vivian Blackstorm stepped forward. She wore armor ceremonial silver that caught the light and made her look like a warrior goddess. Her dark hair was braided for battle. Her eyes were cold calculation. On what grounds, Elder Marcus asked? On the grounds that Winter Ashford is unfit to rule. Vivian's voice rang clear and confident. She has no alpha bloodline, no training, no wolf capable of shifting. She was a servant, property for years. She knows nothing of leadership, of politics, of what it takes to stand beside a king. Murmurs of agreement rippled through certain sections of the crowd. Winter felt them like knives. Logan started forward at murder in his eyes, but Winter's hand on his arm stopped him. Let me, she whispered. Winter, please let me answer her. Logan hesitated, then nodded slowly, stepping back but staying close, ready to intervene if needed. Winter turned to face Vivian. The woman stood 20 feet away, beautiful and deadly, and everything Winter was not. You're right, Winter said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. I have no alpha training. I've never led a pack. I've never fought in battle. Vivian's smile sharpened. Victory already claimed. But I have survived, Winter continued, her voice growing stronger. I survived systematic poisoning. 3 drops of wolfsbane in every meal for over a decade, slowly killing my wolf while I endured. I survived a silver collar welded around my throat for 10 years. I survived being burned with hot pokers for the crime of looking at my alpha wrong. I survived watching my brother be beaten because I was too slow, too weak, too broken to protect him. The hall had gone deathly quiet. I survived a debt I could never repay, designed to keep me enslaved until I died. I survived being told every single day that I was nothing, that I was defective, that I was unworthy of even the smallest kindness. Winter took 3 steps forward. Vivian actually stepped back. You stand there in your pretty armor, with your perfect bloodline and your prestigious training, and you tell me I'm unfit to rule. Winter's eyes blazed. You have no idea what it takes to survive when the world wants you dead. You've never had to endure pain that would make alphas weep. You've never had to be strong when strength meant simply waking up for one more day. She took another step. The crowd was leaning in now, hanging on every word. I may not be able to shift. I may not have your training, but I have something you will never understand, Lady Blackstorm. I have the strength of someone who has already survived hell and came out the other side still fighting. Winter stopped 5 feet from Vivian, close enough to see the flicker of uncertainty in the woman's eyes. So yes, challenge me. Question my worthiness. But know this, I have already faced monsters worse than you. I have already endured tortures you couldn't imagine, and I am still standing. She turned, addressing the entire hall now. I am Winter Ashford, descendant of the Winter Queens, fated mate of your Alpha King, and I claim this crown not because of bloodline or training, but because I have earned it through refusing to break. Her eyes swept the crowd, daring them, demanding they see her. Anyone who challenges me challenges him. She gestured to Logan, who stood with his eyes blazing gold and his wolf riding so close to the surface that the air around him shimmered. Choose carefully. The silence that followed was absolute. Then from somewhere in the Omega section, someone started clapping. Slow, deliberate. Others joined. The sound built, spreading through the hall like wildfire. Not just Omegas, now Betas too. Some younger Alphas. Wolves who had seen injustice and recognized it. The applause grew until it was deafening. Vivian stood frozen, her challenge dying on her lips. She looked around at the crowd, seeing her support crumbling, and her face went pale. Lady Blackstorm, Elder Marcus said quietly, do you wish to press your challenge to combat? Vivian looked at Logan, at the gold pouring from his eyes, at the promise of violence written in every line of his body. She was a smart woman. Smart enough to know that challenging Winter meant fighting the Alpha King himself. No, she said finally. Withdraw my challenge. Then step back, Marcus commanded. Vivian retreated into the crowd, but her eyes promised this wasn't over. Marcus turned to the assembly. Are there any other challenges? Winter held her breath, waiting. I have one. The voice was male, familiar, and when Winter turned toward it, ice flooded her veins. Garrett Thornwell stood at the back of the hall. He'd entered quietly, probably snuck in while attention was on Vivian. He looked terrible, unwashed, unshaven, desperate. His eyes were wild. Logan's growl was subsonic, a rumble that made the stones beneath their feet vibrate. You were given 3 days to leave, Logan said, his voice pure death. Those 3 days ended at dawn. You're in violation of exile. Guards. I challenge on different grounds, Garrett said quickly. His voice shook, but he pushed forward anyway. Desperation making him stupid. The bond is false. Winter Ashford is not capable of being a true mate. She's defective. Her wolf is broken. She cannot shift, cannot hunt, cannot fight. The moon would never choose such a creature as mate to the Alpha King. Rage exploded through Winter's chest. Not fear, not shame, pure incandescent fury. Prove it, Garrett continued, gaining confidence as he spoke. The coronation requires the new queen to shift and run with her mate. If she cannot complete this basic requirement, the bond must be false. She must be rejected. Murmurs swept the hall. He was right, it was tradition. The new queen had to shift. Had to prove she could run with the king's wolf. Winter hadn't been able to shift for over a decade. The poison had crippled her wolf, buried her so deep that Winter had barely felt her. But last night at the window, her wolf had stirred. Ready. Logan moved between Winter and Garrett, his posture pure threat. You dare, he snarled. You dare come here after what you did, and I accept the challenge. Winter's voice cut through Logan's rage. She stepped around him, facing Garrett across the length of the hall. What? Logan spun toward her. Winter, no, you don't have to. He's right, Winter said. Her voice was eerily calm. The tradition exists for a reason. The queen must be able to run with her mate. If I cannot shift, then perhaps I'm not meant for this throne. She looked past Logan to Elder Marcus. I accept the challenge. I will shift and run. And when I do, Garrett Thornwell and Lady Vivian Blackstorm will answer for a conspiracy to commit regicide. The hall erupted in chaos, shouts of confusion and shock. Vivian's face went white. Elder Marcus raised his hand for silence. Explain, he commanded. Winter's eyes never left Garrett. Last night I overheard Lady Blackstorm and Garrett Thornwell plotting in the courtyard. 20 rogues, silver arrows, timed for my shift attempt when Logan would be distracted. They planned to assassinate the king and claim the throne by combat right. Gasps rippled through the hall. Logan's eyes flashed gold, his wolf surging. Do you deny this? Marcus asked Vivian. Vivian's face had gone from white to gray. She looked for allies, found none. The traditional families who'd supported her were quietly backing away. It was just talk. Planning. We never actually... Guards, Logan's voice was death itself. Arrest Lady Vivian Blackstorm for a conspiracy to commit regicide. If found guilty, the punishment is execution. Guards materialized from the crowd surrounding Vivian. She screamed as they seized her arms. Wait! Garrett's voice was panicked. The rogues, they're already here. Their arrows whistled through the air. 20 silver-tipped arrows fired from hidden positions in the rafters, all aimed at Logan. But Logan's guards were ready. They'd been ready for 2 days. Shields went up, intercepting most of the arrows. The few that got through were deflected by Logan's armor. The crowd erupted into chaos. Screams, wolves shifting, rogues dropping from the rafters, silver blades flashing. And Winter felt her wolf surge. Not afraid, furious. These bastards were trying to kill her mate. Logan spun toward the attackers, his shift beginning. But Winter was faster. She closed her eyes and reached inward, searching for the wolf she hadn't felt in so long. There, not hiding anymore, not terrified, waiting. They hurt us, the wolf whispered. But we're stronger now. We have a mate to protect. Winter surrendered to the shift. Pain exploded through her body, her bones breaking, reshaping. Her spine arched, and she screamed a sound that started human and ended in a howl. The shift was agony. Years of poison fighting against years of suppression, fighting against a wolf that had been caged too long. But Winter didn't fight it. She embraced it. Let it tear through her like wildfire. And her wolf, her beautiful, terrified, powerful wolf, finally came home. The shift completed in an explosion of light and sound. Where Winter Ashford had stood, there was now a wolf, but not a normal wolf. The hall gasped as one. Even the fighting stopped. Even Elder Marcus took a step back. Winter's wolf was massive, not Logan-sized, but far larger than a normal female. Her fur was pure white, not cream, not silver, white as fresh snow. White as winter itself, and her eyes. Her eyes were violet, not gold like an alpha, not the amber of a beta or the brown of an omega. Violet, the color of the winter queens from legend, the color that marked them as different, as other, as sacred. Winter's wolf threw back her head and howled. The sound shook the rafters, made chandeliers sway, carried the weight of years of silenced rage and pain and power finally unleashed. Logan's wolf answered. His shift was instantaneous, one moment man the next, a massive black wolf with eyes of molten gold. He was larger than Winter, built for war. But when he approached her, he approached as an equal. The two wolves circled each other. Black and white, gold and violet, power and power meeting and recognizing and claiming. Then Logan's wolf lowered his head, submitted to her. The Alpha King's wolf bowed to the Winter Queen. The hall erupted, shouts of shock and awe and fear. Because everyone knew the stories. Everyone knew what violet eyes meant. The sacred winter wolf, the queens from legend who came once in a generation, who had power that went beyond normal wolves. Winter was myth made flesh. She turned her violet gaze toward the rogues still fighting Logan's guards. Her wolf was done hiding, done being prey. Time to hunt. Winter launched herself at the nearest rogue. She was smaller than him but faster. She dodged his claws, went for his throat, and took him down in 3 seconds. Logan fought beside her, his black wolf a whirlwind of teeth and fury. Together they were unstoppable. The rogues didn't stand a chance. Within minutes it was over. 15 rogues dead, 5 captured, and Garrett Thornwell cowering in a corner, his face ashen. Winter shifted back to human. The change was easier this time, her wolf settling into place like she'd always been there. Someone threw a cloak over her Rowena. Winter stood over Garrett in human form, the cloak barely covering her. You spent years trying to break me, she said quietly. Poisoning me, burning me, telling me I was defective. And you know what the truly beautiful thing is? She crouched down so they were eye level. Every drop of poison you gave me, every scar you left, every moment of pain, it made my wolf stronger. She wasn't broken, Garrett. She was evolving, becoming something you could never control. Winter stood. I could kill you now, my wolf wants to, but I'm going to do something worse. She looked at Elder Marcus. Exile him, permanently. Strip him of his pack, his title, his name. Let him wander as a rogue, knowing that he had a sacred winter wolf, and threw her away because he was too small to see what she was. She looked back down at Garrett. Every wolf you meet will know your failure. Every pack will turn you away. You'll die alone, Garrett. Unmated. Unremembered. Nothing. Marcus nodded. It will be done. Guards, remove him. Garrett was dragged away, screaming protests that no one listened to. Winter turned to where Vivian was being held. The woman's face was a mask of terror. Lady Vivian Blackstorm, Winter said, her voice carrying through the hall, you challenged my claim. You conspired to assassinate the king. You hired rogues to murder him during a sacred ceremony. She stepped closer. The punishment for regicide is execution. But first tell me who else was involved, which family supported this plot. Vivian's eyes darted around the hall, looking for allies, finding none. Her voice broke. It was just me and Garrett. The families. They wanted you gone, but they didn't know about the assassination. I swear. Winter looked at Elder Marcus. Is she lying? Marcus closed his eyes using his oracle sight. After a moment, he opened them. She speaks truth. The traditional families wanted the union challenged, but not through murder. Lady Blackstorm acted alone in hiring the rogues. Then she alone will pay the price. Winter's voice was cold, final. Take her to the cells. She'll stand trial within the week. If found guilty, execution by beheading. Vivian screamed as she was dragged away. The sound echoed off the stone walls, then faded. Winter turned back to Logan, who had shifted to human and was staring at her with something like awe. "You're magnificent," he said hoarsely. "We're magnificent," Winter corrected. She walked to him, took his hand. Together. Elder Marcus approached carrying two crowns. One was the brutal thing of dark metal Logan already wore. The other was delicate silver etched with snowflakes and set with violet stones that matched Winter's wolf eyes. "Never in 500 years has a sacred winter wolf been found," Marcus said. His voice shook slightly. "They are myth, legend. Queens who ruled not through strength of claw, but through strength of will, through the power to endure and emerge unbroken." He held up Winter's crown. "But before I crown you, there is something you should know about your heritage, about why you were hidden." Winter's breath caught. "Tell me." Marcus looked at Logan, who nodded permission. "Your mother was the last Winter Queen's daughter. When she bore you a sacred white wolf, the traditional families panicked. They couldn't control you, couldn't marry you off for political gain. So they hired rogues, made it look like a random attack." Winter's hands clenched. "Who ordered it?" "3 families, all dead now, killed in the Blood Moon massacre." Marcus's expression was grim. "Logan made sure of it, though he didn't know you existed then. He just knew someone had ordered the Queen's daughter murdered." Winter turned to Logan. "You avenged my parents." "I avenged an injustice," Logan said quietly. "I didn't know the child survived. Didn't know they'd hidden you as a servant. But yes, the families who ordered that assassination died screaming." Winter felt the last piece of her past click into place. Her parents hadn't abandoned her. They died protecting her. And Logan had already punished their killers years before he even knew she existed. "Thank you," she whispered. Logan's hand found hers. "We were always meant to find each other, Winter, even when we didn't know it yet." Marcus cleared his throat. "Now if we may continue," he raised the crown high. "By blood and bone, by moon and mountain, by the old laws and the ancient pacts, I crown you Winter Ashford, sacred Queen of the Western Territories. May your reign be long and your enemies know fear." He placed the crown on her head. It settled like it had always belonged there. The hall erupted in cheers, not polite applause, roaring approval. Wolves of all ranks bowing, submitting to their new queen. But Winter raised her hand for silence. "I have one more thing to say," she announced. Her voice carried to every corner of the hall. "My first decree as your queen." The crowd went silent, waiting. "Effective immediately, all Omega servants held by debt bondage are freed. Their debts are erased. They will be paid back wages for every day of service. Any Alpha who refuses to comply answers to me personally." Gasps rippled through the hall. The traditional families looked outraged. But Winter wasn't done. "Second Wolfsbane is banned from the Western Territories. Possession is a crime punishable by exile. Selling it is punishable by death. Healers may apply for licensed quantities tracked and monitored, but never again will a wolf be poisoned while we look away." She looked out at the crowd, at the Omegas who were crying, at the traditional Alphas who were furious, at Logan who stood beside her with pride blazing in his eyes. "I was invisible for years," Winter said, silenced, broken down, told I was nothing, but I survived. And now I will make sure no one else has to endure what I endured. This is not a request, this is law." Logan stepped forward, pulling Winter close. "My queen has spoken," he said. His voice was steel. "Anyone who has a problem with her decrees can challenge me, right now in the old way." Silence greeted the declaration. No one was stupid enough to challenge both the Alpha King and the sacred Winter Wolf. Logan pulled Winter into a kiss, deep and claiming and full of promise. "My queen," he murmured against her lips. "My king," she answered. They turned to face their people. 2 crowns, 2 wolves, 2 survivors who had found each other in the darkness and built something unbreakable. Together they had become unstoppable. The celebration lasted through the night, but Winter and Logan slipped away before dawn. They walked through the quiet fortress to the library that had become their sanctuary. Logan pulled Winter into his arms the moment the door closed, holding her like she might disappear. "I thought I'd lost you," he said roughly. "When you started to shift and you screamed, I know, I felt your terror through the bond." Winter pulled back to look at him. "But I also felt your faith. You believed I could do it even when I didn't believe in myself. Because I know you. I've known you for 4 years, Winter. I've watched you survive impossible things with grace and strength that humbles me." He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "You're not just my mate. You're my equal, my partner. the other half of my soul, and now the whole world knows it. Winter smiled. It felt strange on her face, genuine happiness after so many years of pain. What happens now? Now, Logan pulled her toward the bedroom. Now we sleep. Tomorrow we start building the kingdom we want. One where Omegas aren't poisoned, where servants are paid fairly, where no one is told they're defective for being different. He stopped at the bedroom door, looking at her seriously. Together, we do this together, not me ruling and you following, equal partners in everything. Winter kissed him softly. Together, she agreed. They fell into bed as the first light of dawn crept through the windows. Two crowns sat side by side on the mantel. Two wolves, black and white, gold and violet, curled around each other in the space between souls where the mate bond lived. And for the first time in over a decade, Winter Ashford slept without nightmares. Because she'd finally come home. Not to a place, not to a throne. Home to the man who had waited for her in the darkness. Who had seen her when she was invisible. Who had known her worth when she'd forgotten it herself, home to herself. The invisible Omega was gone. The sacred Winter Queen had risen. And she would never be silenced again. 6 months later, Winter stood on the battlements of Blackstone Fortress, watching the summer sun set over the mountains. Her hand rested on the stone and she smiled as she felt her wolf stir contentedly inside her. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn, didn't need to. She knew his scent, his presence, his heartbeat like her own. Logan wrapped his arms around her from behind his chin, resting on her shoulder. The council meeting ran long, he said. I'm sorry. How did they take the new Omega protection laws? 3 traditional families threatened to leave the territory. I told them the door was open. His voice held grim satisfaction. The other 12 voted in favor. Change is slow, but it's happening. Winter leaned back against him, savoring his warmth. Micah wrote, he's doing well at the academy. Top of his class in strategy. He has his sister's mind for survival. Logan kissed her neck. He'll make a fine beta when he graduates. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn gold and pink and purple. Are you happy? Logan asked quietly. Winter turned in his arms to face him. I spent years being invisible, being told I was nothing, being broken down until I forgot what it felt like to be whole. She reached up, tracing the scar on his cheek. You gave me back my voice, my power, my wolf. You gave me a throne and a crown and respect I never thought I'd have. Logan started to smile, but Winter shook her head. But that's not what makes me happy. What makes me happy is this. You and me, the quiet moments when the crown comes off and we're just 2 people who found each other in the dark. She kissed him softly. So yes, I'm happy. Deliriously, impossibly, permanently happy. Logan's smile was blinding. He picked her up and spun her, laughing, a sound she'd once thought impossible from the grim AlphaKing. I love you, Winter Ashford. My queen. My mate. My home. I love you too, Logan Steele. Forever. And as the sun set on Blackstone Fortress, painting the world in shades of gold and violet, 2 wolves, sacred and king, held each other close and knew they had finally found what they'd been searching for. Not just a throne, not just a kingdom, but a home built from broken pieces that fit together perfectly. And they would defend it with everything they had, together, always together.